My name is Andrea Van Hook, and I'm the Executive Director of RESNA. We so appreciate your interest in the ATP certification. Joining me is Julie Piriano, PT, ATP, SMS. She's waving right now. She's the chair of the Professional Standards Board at RESNA that oversees the ATP certification. She's going to be helping me out with the Q&A. We will be spending about 30 minutes reviewing the requirements, and then we will open it up for questions. If you could please keep yourself on mute during this time so as not to disturb the rest of the participants. As you think of questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We have already been receiving questions this morning via email, and Danielle has been keeping track of those. So if you sent in a question via email, we've got them, and we will answer those questions as soon as we get to the Q&A. So you are here for, are you eligible for the ATP and other life questions? I hope you like my picture of Yoda. Danielle, we need to turn on live transcription, please. Thank you. We will go ahead and turn that on. So live transcription is now on. If you need the live transcription, all you got to do is click on it and you will be able to see it. So let's go ahead and get started. I view Yoda as being the wise one of all things, so I hope you enjoy. He will be popping up every once in a while during our presentation. So let's first go to, hang on, step around. So let's first talk about what is the ATP certification. So the Assistive Technology Professional certification recognizes demonstrated competence in analyzing the needs of consumers with disabilities. So it also recognizes assisting in the selection of appropriate assistive technology for the consumer's needs and providing training in the use of the selected devices. So it is a certification that recognizes demonstrated competence, and that's the idea behind it. So when you are thinking about becoming ATP certified, the first thing that you need to do is to consider whether you will qualify to become ATP certified. And to qualify to become ATP certified, the first part is demonstrating competence. So when you decide that you would like to become ATP certified and you want to take the exam, we will be looking at three things: assistive technology education and training, your work experience, and then finally passing the certification exam. So it's three things that you need to be eligible for the ATP certification. Where do ATPs come from? They come from all over. So they come from every background. Most did not go to school and earn a degree in assistive technology. Some went to school to become clinicians, like occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech language pathologists. Some studied engineering. Some developed an AT because of a friend or a family member that had a disability. Some entered the field because it was an interesting job. I personally know an ATP who was a Broadway dancer. And when he was injured and had to do rehab, he got interested in assistive technology. So you can come from all over. And our certification program takes all of that into account. We welcome everyone into this field. So the first thing that you need to do is find out what AT education and training you need. How much do you need? That depends on your education level. So if you have a high school diploma or a GED, then you will need to document 30 hours of assistive technology training in addition to your diploma. If you have an associate's degree in a non-rehab science, it is 20 hours. An associate degree in a rehab science, we are assuming that your degree includes assistive technology training, so you do not need to document any additional training beyond your degree. Bachelor's degree in non-rehab science, you would need 10 hours of assistive technology training. So bachelor's degree in rehab science, bachelor's degree in special education, master's degree or higher in rehab science, master's degree or higher in special education. Your degrees have included concepts and work in assistive technology. So you do not need additional assistive technology training if you have those degrees. Now, I'm sure some of you are asking, what is rehab science? What do we mean by that? We have the definition on our website, and we also have lists of degrees that qualify. So let me go through those right now. So a rehab science is a degree in medicine, nursing, low vision rehabilitation, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech language pathology, audiology, vocational rehabilitation, engineering, a degree in biomedical, clinical, or rehabilitation engineering, prosthetics and orthotics, recreation therapy, and rehabilitation technology. So any of these would be considered a rehab science degree. The rehabilitation technology degree is usually an associate degree curriculum for technicians that is focused upon application of technologies to the needs of people with disabilities. So that is what we mean by a rehab science degree. Now let's go back to this AT education and training and take a look at this slide. Find your education level, and let me start at the top. If you click on more, there will be some reaction emojis that you can use. So let's see, how many folks with us right now have a high school or GED diploma and will need about 30 hours? We'll need 30 hours of assistive technology training. Can you raise your hand or hit the happy face emoji or anything like that? See some raised hands out there. That's great. How about those who have an associate degree in a non-rehab science and need 20 hours of assistive technology training? Do we have any of those folks with us here today? Anyone raising their hand? No, doesn't look like it. How about a bachelor's degree in rehab science? Do we have any folks with a bachelor's degree in a rehab science? So that's occupational therapy, physical therapy, biomedical engineering, that kind of thing. Anybody? All right, we have a few people who have that. So now you know how much assistive technology training, documented assistive technology training you will need in order to be eligible for the ATP certification program. So let's move on. The next part of being eligible for the ATP certification program is having work experience. And work experience means that you are working in the field and you are providing services in person to consumers and others related to or working with consumers. The work experience must be paid. However, student field work in a COA rate accredited program is also acceptable. And we'll get to the COA rate accredited programs in another few minutes. So it is AT work experience. Services must be provided in person to consumers, i.e. people who are with disabilities who are using technology, and others related to or working with consumers. So you can assist another ATP who is working with consumers and that work experience would qualify. And as you can see here, we consider in-person to also mean virtual. If you are working virtually over Zoom with a consumer on their technology needs, that is relevant work experience. So let's talk a little bit more about work experience, because this tends to be where we get most of our questions. So examples of eligible work experience, and you can find all these examples on our website. So if you are doing evaluations, assessments, and other direct-to-consumer student or student services, that qualifies. Fitting, adjustment, and readjustment services for technologies that people are using. Implementation and training for consumers, but also caregivers or students and support personnel qualifies. Product development that involves direct consumer participation, that qualifies. So those are examples of eligible AT work experience. Now, some examples of non-eligible AT work experience are, for example, customer service, where you're scheduling and information gathering and like paperwork processing of assistive technology orders. That does not qualify because you are not working directly with the consumer on their technology needs. Billing, collections, and or claims processing of assistive technology products and services, also not eligible. Professional development, didactic teaching, or instructing providers and teachers on topics of assistive technology, which does not include consumer contact, that is not eligible. Research and or development, which does not include consumer contact, is also not eligible. And telecommunication relay services are not eligible. So essentially, the work experience that is eligible is when you are working directly with a person with a disability on their technology needs. That's the work experience we are looking for. Now, how much work experience do you need? And here's where it gets tricky. So, in terms of the work experience, it goes directly back to your educational level. So for a high school diploma or GED, you need 6,000 hours of assistive technology work experience over 10 years, within 10 years. Associate degree in non-rehab science, remember the difference between non-rehab science and rehab science. So non-rehab science, it's 4,000 hours within 6 years, and so on and so forth, down to a master's degree or higher in rehab science or in special education is 1,000 hours within 6 years. Now, some of you may be wondering, why all these years? And that is because, as we've already discussed, ATPs come from all over. So you can come from a completely different field and start working in assistive technology and slowly be working up the work experience. And within that time frame, decide to become ATP certified. So that's perfectly reasonable. We take that into account, and that is provided for within the program. Now, many of you are probably wondering, how do you figure that out? How do you figure out your AT work experience over the number of years and come up with the hours? And you're thinking to yourself, my God, 6,000 hours is a lot. Well, let's take a look at an example. So this is Elaine. She has a bachelor's degree in physical therapy. She works at a rehabilitation hospital already. 2 years ago, she joined the assistive technology team as a physical therapist doing evaluations and assessments as a team member. So she was not the only person working with the consumer. She was part of a team. She spends 20 hours a week doing evaluations and assessments. Okay, so everyone sees Elaine. So the first thing we need to figure out is, does she need assistive technology training? So if we go back to our slide on assistive technology training, she has a bachelor's degree in physical therapy. So her bachelor's degree is in a rehab science. She does not need any additional assistive technology training because it was included in her study for her degree. Now we need to look at what is her work experience requirement. So if we go to the work experience requirement, right here, she has a bachelor's degree in a rehab science, so she needs 1,500 hours within 6 years. So 1,500 hours within 6 years. Let's remember that. Now let's go to the calculation. She spends 20 hours a week doing evaluations and assessments. Does she need AT training? We already know she does not need AT training. Her degree fulfills that requirement. She needs 1,500 hours of work experience over 6 years. So here we go. A full-time job where you're working 40 hours a week has 2,080 work hours in a year. Elaine works 20 hours a week on evaluations and assessments. There are 52 weeks in a year. So 20 hours times 52 weeks equals 1,040 hours in a year. She's been a part of the AT team for 2 years. So 1,040 hours times 2 years is 2,080 hours. She has the 1,500 hours she needs to qualify with the work experience. Now, you can also think to yourself, well, I take 2 weeks of vacation every year. So you can multiply your hours by 50 weeks instead of 52. That's perfectly fine. But that is how you figure out your work experience. So she has the AT training and the work experience. She is eligible to apply for the ATP certification and take the exam. Now, when you apply, you turn in your application and you're approved to take the exam, you have a 90-day window in which to schedule your exam. So it's important to recognize that when you apply, you probably want to be pretty ready to take that exam because you will need to take it within that 90-day period. Now, what happens if you are in a situation where you do not have the work experience and you're wondering how you can get the work experience without being ATP certified? We have a special program for that. It's called the Accelerated Pathway. So candidates that apply for this program are usually recent graduates or students in assistive technology educational programs. They feel ready to take the exam, but they do not have the work experience. So going through this program allows you to go ahead and take the exam, and then you can put candidate for the ATP on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile. And as you're looking for a job, it will show your dedication and commitment to potential employers. So in order to qualify for the accelerated pathway, you must submit an application. The application is free. It is on our website. In that application, you will be asked questions about how you intend to get the work experience. So you fill that out. Once you're approved, you will have to pay the fee for the exam. If you pass the exam, you are not an ATP. You are a candidate for the ATP. You have 6 years from the date you pass the exam to get the required education and work experience completed. Every 2 years, you have to renew your candidate for the ATP status. And every 2 years, you are required to show that you have been getting assistive technology training, 20 hours of assistive technology training and education over that time period. So this allows you to go ahead and take the exam and go out and get that work experience. And once you get that work experience, you can get your ATP certification. There's also another option that allows you to get credits for work experience. And that is if you are studying assistive technology at one of our 3 COA-rate accredited programs. The COA-rate accreditation is an accreditation of quality assistive technology programs. It is run by RESNA. And there are currently 3 assistive technology programs that are accredited. It's the University of Illinois, Chicago, the University of Pittsburgh, and the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And all the information for these programs is on our website. And we also are hoping to be able to add more programs to this in the coming years. So let's recap. To be eligible for ATP certification, you need to assess how much assistive technology training you need, how much direct-to-consumer work experience you have, and pass the exam. You can apply to take the exam through the accelerated pathway if you do not have the work experience. If you earn a degree from a COA-rate accredited academic program, you can earn credits towards the work experience requirement. All of this information is available to you in the ATP Candidate Handbook, which is one of the handouts for this webinar. It's on the webinar page. It's also on our website. Now, I'm sure there are lots of questions about the exam. So this is just a quick overview of the exam itself. The exam has 200 multiple choice questions. It is a computer-based exam. The time limit to take the exam is 4 hours. You must schedule your exam at a Prometric testing center. These testing centers are all over the country, although there are many more testing centers located in major metropolitan areas than in rural areas. If you're in a rural part of the country, you may have to travel a bit to get to a Prometric testing center. I get asked all the time if you should study for the exam if you've been working in assistive technology. You do want to study. Do not wing it. You do want to study. The exam outline is posted on our website. It takes you through all the domains of the exam and what the questions will be like. There is an ATP readiness tool on that page that you can download to perform your own self-assessment. You need to concentrate your study in those areas where you are weakest. If you are working in assistive technology, most of us who work in assistive technology specialize in one area of assistive technology. For example, seating and mobility. The ATP exam covers all areas of assistive technology, and as you heard before, demonstrates competence in at least knowing what the basics of those other areas. So you do need to know some basics about other areas of assistive technology that you might not have work experience in. There are books, courses, and webinars listed on the website, our website, that you can use to prepare. There is a book by Cook and Hussey, the AT Fundamentals textbook that most of us who have studied in school, we know all about Cook and Hussey. We do offer an ATP practice exam. It's 20 questions, get you used to doing a computer-based exam, multiple choice exam. It is free with our AT Fundamentals course. Otherwise, it costs $100. RESNA's AT Fundamentals course, which we offer several times a year, is not a prep course for the ATP exam, but it does provide an overview of assistive technology, and people do use it to get familiar with other areas of assistive technology that they might not have work experience in. Also, if you can, find an ATP mentor. We have on our website, right on the homepage, find an ATP database, and you can put in your city and see the ATPs that are near you and reach out to one and see if they will mentor you. Our ATPs tend to be, well, they all are, great people with big hearts. So I think you will find that it's a very friendly community and they're very interested in mentoring others. Now RESNA, because we offer the exam, we are not able to endorse any ATP prep courses or prep materials. So contacting us to say, are these flashcards a good idea? Have you heard about this course or not? We're not able to help with that, I'm sorry. But you can post in our free and available AT forum, which is our online community for assistive technology folks. You can post in that forum and ask those questions and have others, or members, advise you. But we're not able to provide any advice on that. So now you know the eligibility requirements for the ATP certification. You know what assistive technology training is required depending on your educational level. You know what direct-to-consumer work experience is required depending on your educational level. You know a little bit about the exam and suggested exam preparation, and you know about the resources available to you on the RESNA website and through the RESNA website. So that is the conclusion of my presentation. So we're now going to open it up for Q&A. We're going to start with the chat. So I'm going to ask Danielle to please take a look at the chat, and let's start with what you have as the first question.
Sounds good, Andrea. So a number of the questions were answered by Julie in the chat. A lot of specific
Thank you, Julie.
questions.
But I'm not sure that everybody has seen them, so there might be an opportunity to go over them and talk through them so that everybody is singing from the same song sheet on this.
That's perfect. And so the first question in the chat was, so the hours needed of AT experience, are these hours credit hours for college courses?
And the answer for that is no, unless you are getting a degree from a co-rate accredited program.
Is that the work experience hours or is that the education hours? That I didn't answer that one because I wasn't sure what the question was actually asking. For the education hours, if you are on a track for an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or a master's degree, it's pretty well spelled out. If the associate degree is in a non-rehab science, bachelor's degree is in a non-rehab science, rehab science, or special education, then the expectation is that part of the education has to do with individuals with disabilities, technology applications and solutions and options and et cetera, and that there it may also be an opportunity to interface with individuals, especially if it's a rehab science or special education, individuals with disabilities. And so the number of hours or the training that breaks it down for you as far as if any additional training is needed. If you have a high school diploma or have obtained your GED and no college, then the education and training would be part of continuing education units, IASET approved continuing education units, as well as continuing education credits. So the 30 hours of training, half of which can be continuing education credits, or 15 hours, and half of it would come from ISET approved continuing education units, or CEUs. So hopefully that's answered the question.
Great. Thank you, Julie. The next question is a bachelor's degree in a pre-med curriculum considered under the medicine requirement for a degree?
So the way that I answered that is that it's a maybe, because pre-med may be part of a medical track. It really depends on where that pre-med track is within the university. If it's in the biology space, for example, then it may not be a rehab science. Whereas if it's in a medical track, it may be. So that one's a difficult one to answer, because we would have to look at that one on a case-by-case basis. Where is that track positioned within the university curriculum?
Great, thank you. Then the next question is, what about master's degree in something other than rehab science or special education?
So that would, it's not listed there, but it would be the same as a bachelor's degree in a non-rehab science.
Great. And then what about a post-bachelor certificate in special education?
So we don't have any way to recognize certificate programs in any way, shape, or form. And so it would default back to what is your bachelor's degree in. If your bachelor's degree is in special education, that's the line where it would fall. If your bachelor's degree is in a non-rehab science and is also not in special education, then the 10 hours of additional training would be needed. That 10 hours of additional training was likely fulfilled by the training that was required to earn the certificate in special education. And so that would apply, but I can't say a blanket statement as to yes or no on that one. It really is dependent upon what the training curricula was in obtaining the certification in special education.
Great, thank you. And the next question is, how do we document our hours?
So I didn't know if those hours were, the question was related to work hours, or if the question was related to training hours. If it's related to training hours, then every time you take a course that is presented at a conference, available online through RESNA, and a number of different other manners in which you can receive education in assistive technology, there's always a certificate of attendance that goes along with that. And that certificate of attendance should have the number of hours that you participated in the course. So for a continuing education unit course, 1 hour of education equals 0.1 CEUs. So if the requirement is that you have 30 hours, you can have, as I said before, 15 hours of continuing education credits, and those would be listed in hours. And you can have 1.5 CEUs, which equates to 15 hours of education, but it's documented as 1.5. But in total, you would have participated in AT training for 30 hours. And that the way that you prove it is that you have the certificate of attendance. If that question is related to work experience, then on the application, as you fill out what the work experience is, you write down what it is that you do in your job or as part of your job duties that would be direct consumer AT related. Your employer signs and dates that and attests to the fact that the information above it is accurate and correct. What I would hope is that you have assured that your job description outlines your responsibilities as it relates to AT provision in some way, shape, or form, and may even spell out in your job description what the FTE or full-time equivalency of your role in that job would be related to AT.
Thank you for clarifying the differentiation between the two. The next question is, does fitting a walker or manual wheelchair also count? And I believe this question came through when discussing work experience.
So assistive technology is a wide array of technologies and a vast group of solutions that might be applicable for an individual with any sort of disability. And so there are low-tech solutions like canes and crutches and walkers and standard manual wheelchairs that are pretty basic. From an OT perspective, it might be rocker knives, curly Q shoelaces, door handle solutions, and other low-tech solutions that helps a person engage in activities of daily living. From the AAC world, it may be a simple communication system that is a smiley face and a frowny face, or a yes and no, or a red and green, simple solutions. That's assistive technology, just as complex rehab power wheelchairs are, just as very sophisticated electronic aids to daily living are, just as very sophisticated AUG-COM devices are. And so all of it counts, because if there is an individual that needs a technology solution and you are actively engaged in the match between the individual and the technology solution, in selecting the solution, in training to the solution, evaluating it, all of those components, it doesn't matter what the solution is. What counts is the participation in the process of selecting the correct solution. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you. The next question is, what about assistive technology specialist position in higher education, working directly with students with disabilities and assisting them in finding the appropriate assistive technology that helps with their education?
That sounds like direct to individual work experience. That would count. So, you know, it's a three-legged stool. You've got the education component of it. So in that position, I'm going to take a leap of assumption that there's at least a bachelor's degree in special education, maybe higher. And so no additional AT training would be needed. And so now we go to the work experience, and the work experience, depending on where your degree falls, then drives how many hours of work experience need to be part of that job description over a period of time. But it sounds like what has been described would be direct to individual assessment, finding the right solution, training to that solution, and those sorts of things, unless I've misunderstood the question.
Thank you. Next question is, is a bachelor's in kinesiology considered rehab technology?
Kinesiology, athletic training, degrees such as that aren't traditional rehab sciences. But again, looking at where is that track positioned in the university options of course selection, does it fall in the applied sciences curricula, which is typically where things like PT, OT, speech and language pathology, and those things fall. Is the curriculum similar to the curriculum that we find in traditional PTOT, SLP spaces, but the degree at the end, the piece of paper, says something slightly differently? And so I can't say a definite yes, I can't say a definite no. Unfortunately, that would be one of those that we may need to look at on a case-by-case basis. And it would be incumbent upon the applicant to describe the education and training related to that degree that might be applicable to AT, and work with individuals with disabilities and AT solutions.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. Are the evaluations completed PT evaluation only, or does the evaluation include an AT component?
Okay, I'm a physical therapist. Part of my job was evaluating in a rehab facility, evaluating individuals with disabilities and creating a plan of care or treatment plan to mitigate the disabilities or the challenges or whatever was going on. And so sometimes that evaluation results in a plan of care that may be used with, let's say, a walker and training with the walker. So there's an AT solution for that patient. That was an expectation of the department, that if a walker was necessary and we're going to evaluate it, we're going to train to it, etc., then that is part of the AT solution. In an orthopedic setting where I'm setting somebody up to increase strength and range of motion and influence the gait pattern, but there's no AT component to it, then no, that wouldn't count. So it's part of the bigger picture as to what type of individuals you're typically working with and whether there is an AT component.
Great, thank you. Next question is, can you use the accelerated pathway if you have some of the work experience, but not all of the hours that you need?
So that's exactly why the accelerated pathway was designed. As I said before, there are 3 legs to the stool, if you will, of becoming a certified ATP. 1 is passing the exam. 2 is having the work experience, and 3 is having the education and training in place. Traditionally, before individuals applied to sit for the exam, they had the training done under their belt. They had the work experience to say, this is how I want to further my career, and I'm going to sit for the exam. There are other individuals that are well prepared to sit for the exam but don't have the work experience under their belt. And so if you feel that you are prepared to sit for the exam, we encourage you to do so. Part of the AT candidate for AT pathway, the accelerated pathway, is that when you apply for sitting for the exam, you already have a plan in place as to how you're going to fulfill the other 2 legs of the stool. So if you need additional training, you get that. You can sit for the exam, you can pass the exam. You have to be able to demonstrate how you're going to achieve the other two legs. So being able to sit for the exam because you feel you're prepared, good to go. You can be a candidate for ATP, fulfill the work experience, and then once that's accomplished and submitted to RESNA for review, it would be approved, and then you would be a certificant or an ATP.
Thank you for going into detail a little bit more about that. The next question is, I'm not sure I fully understand. I have the 1,000 hours of AT experience needed, but don't have the 6-year requirement. Does this make me a candidate until I hit the 6-year mark?
Can you move to the work experience slide, Andrea, or Danielle, who's ever got control of that? The work experience is the number of hours. It doesn't mean that those have to be, that you have to have 6 years under your belt. What it means is that you have 6 years to complete that work experience. So if you are engaged in the provision of AT, but it's, you know, half a day a week, right? And so you've got 4 hours out of the 40-hour work week that you are directly involved in some aspect of the provision of assistive technologies. 4 hours a week times 50 weeks in a year, it's going to take you a while to accomplish the hours. Whereas somebody that is full-time engaged in AT, 40 hours a week times the 50 hours or 50 weeks in the year is going to accomplish those hours much quicker. So the years is the time frame to complete the hours. It doesn't mean that you have to, you know, be all in for 6 years before you're allowed to sit for the exam.
Great, thank you. The next question is there a textbook to use to help study for the exam?
There is not a direct one-on-one. If you read this book and take the exam, you're going to pass. There are lots of different ways in which people learn. There are lots of different materials available to learn the information. But from experience, I would say that book learners typically don't do real well on the exam. Which is why we have the work experience. You have to be immersed in this. I'll give you a suggestion. If you purchase the Cook and Polgar book, as you're reading it, have a pad of paper, and I used a legal pad. Write down things that are unfamiliar with you. Google them. Dive a little bit deeper, figure out how somebody that you've worked with might have been it might have been an option or a solution for them, especially in the areas of AT that you don't practice in intimately. Anybody that is very engaged in augmentative and alternative communication, and that's their primary focus in AT world, may not be familiar with seating and wheeled mobility and vice versa. But you have to know all of it and a little bit about all of it, but it's more about the evaluation and recommendation process and technology solutions. So immerse yourself in materials that you can read in courses like the AT Fundamentals course that's available. But even that isn't going to teach you everything that you need to know in order to sit for this exam. What it does teach you is the basis for which all of this occurs. And so hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Julie. This next question goes hand in hand with one that we had received in our inbox this morning. So how do you prove the hours of experience? Is it via a letter from your employer? And then what should your supervisor or employer be prepared to talk about if or when they are contacted regarding an applicant's work experience?
So I think I said before, there is one of the pages on the application is detailing what the work experience is. It is incumbent upon the applicant to write down what you do on a daily basis or a weekly basis with regard to the direct to consumer or student process of AT recommendation, training, etc. I also said that it would be in your best interest to assure that your job description outlines what the expectations are from your employer related to the provision of AT, and possibly even detail in that job description the number of hours that you would be engaged in those types of services. The employer signs and dates that application, attesting to the fact that the information is accurate. If that application were audited and the employer was contacted to prove that you did what you said you did, they should already be aware of what you wrote down and what they signed and dated being right and true. So other than that, there is no, proof other than don't lie on the application. Andrea or Danielle, did you want to add anything to that?
I can add what we sometimes get questions in is we sometimes get people calling us saying that they've left their employer and so they are not able to get their employer to sign. And unfortunately, this is an industry where you do need to keep your relationships healthy and you need to keep professional relationships. So if you leave a job, please leave it on good terms. Make sure that your employer, you wrap everything up so that if you are in a situation a few years later where you want to get your ATP, you can go back to them and have them, have them sign off on it.
Great, thank you both. I know we have a lot of questions left, but only a few minutes left. So I'll try to get to the more general questions, and then I will save any comments that are specific to an individual, and we will respond to you directly, perhaps about a specific situation after this recording, after this webinar. So let's see. So as far as CEUs and CECs, should they be looking for one over the other for the training hours?
So they can all be CEUs, and that's perfectly acceptable, but they don't all have to be CEUs. Half of them can be CECs. They can't all be CECs, however.
Great, thank you. And then let's see, would a 3-hour graduate AT course equal a certain amount of training hours?
It would be 3 hours. So it would count in the bucket of hours. I do want to answer the question that says, I've been interning with the county board's AT team for roughly a year and have taken part in the home visits, training, implementation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And will it count as work experience? It's not paid. If you are an intern, then my guess is that that is part of your school. And so that goes back to what is the degree that you're working towards that internship is associated with. And that's where the work experience kind of dovetails into that degree line, if you will, in our chart. And that's exactly why when you have a bachelor's degree in a rehab science, part of that degree program is clinicals where you are not paid, but you are directly interfacing with individuals with disabilities. You are possibly working to select technology solutions for some of the patients that you might have. And so that's why the work experience is different for the associate degree, the bachelor's degree, and the master's degree in rehab sciences and special education, because there is a component of internship or clinicals associated with those degrees. And so once you graduate, then the work experience out in the work field where you are not mentored, but directly responsible for the decisions that are made relative to the individuals you're working with, that then starts the ticker, if you will, for the work experience.
Thank you. And just one last question. Is there an updated recertification process if the ATP certification was taken several years ago?
Yes. Yes. So Julie, do you want me to take this?
Go ahead.
So once you become an ATP, you are required to recertify every 2 years. So every 2 years, you need to send in information to RESNA that shows that you have been continuing your assistive technology education training and that you are continuing your work experience of working with consumers on their assistive technology needs. So you would be doing that every 2 years.
Great, thank you.
In response to the individual that's worked at several different Department of Voc Rehab over in multiple states over the last 10 years, you may or may not need to go back to all of those. It really depends on, again, where on the line item do you have a degree that then equals 1,000 hours. 1,000 hours in your current job might be fulfilled if you're a full-time employee doing AT full-time, is going to be fulfilled by the current employer, and there wouldn't be any need to go back and get any additional information from any previous employer. It really depends on, where you are right now in your current job, how long have you been in that job, and how much AT are you involved in your 40-hour work week.
Great. Let's see here. There was a question. So does field work or clinical experience as an OT student count towards work experience?
No.
Also
I'm just gonna, I think I already answered that. The answer is no. That's part of the expectations as the line item for the degree, and it's already built into there. The work experience is once you graduate.
Right.
Okay, great. And what about a physical education teacher with a master's degree who has worked with students using AT over many years?
Physical education would be a non-rehab science, and so follow the line of the non-rehab science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And then are there any requirements for the location or the venue for the experience, such as being within an organization, state, or school?
No.
No. It's delivered in multiple different work experience locations. It can be school-based, it can be home-based, it can be facility, hospital, voc rehab, VA, private practice. Some or all of the above.
One person is an educational diagnostician who case manages students with IEPs. At IEP meetings, they recommend AT as a part of accommodations and modifications such as text to speech and speech to text. Does this count towards work experience?
Yes.
If the person has been the one that's directly evaluating the individual for the solution, yes. If it is in an administrative role that then facilitates the solution, but isn't directly involved in the evaluation, the recommendation, the training, or any other aspect, then the answer would be no.
Okay, great. Someone is an occupational therapist with 20 years experience and has worked in physical disabilities in academic settings. How do they determine if they have adequate requirements to sit for the test? And what are some of the preparation tools available?
I would strongly encourage using the ATP readiness tool because it outlines the questions as it relates to the blueprint of the exam. The blueprint of the exam is based on the survey of lots and lots and lots of people that are actively involved in the provision of assistive technologies, and it's the outline for the exam. So it asks the questions as to whether you feel that you are proficient in that area, whether you operate under supervision in that area, or whether you have zero experience in that area. And so it's kind of, when you honestly answer the questions on the ATP readiness tool, it gives you a pretty good indication as to whether you may or may not be ready to sit for the exam, or if additional study might be in your best interest.
Okay, thank you. And then one attendee is asking, is it possible to get feedback on their application prior to applying for the ATP?
No, that's the whole point of an application. So you go ahead and apply, and if it's not if it's not approved, that's your feedback.
Okay, thank you. One of the last questions here. Someone works as an assistive technology specialist in the AT program in Arizona. Throughout the day, they do evaluations and consultations with clients, search for AT for the clients, prepare the AT to give the clients as loaners, complete basic AT training so clients can use the loaner equipment, discuss AT with coworkers when brainstorming ideas. Would all this be considered for the 1,000 hours of AT experience, or just the direct contact with the client?
Direct contact.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. Direct contact is if you're researching new and advanced technologies that you can put in the bucket of possible solutions for possible people, that's not direct contact. However, if you have evaluated an individual and now you are furthering the match between the client and the technology solutions and are looking for options to then trial with the person when they come back, you're doing direct services because it is earmarked for solutions for a particular individual. So we don't get bogged down in like when in certain states where you have to log driving hours, and your mom or dad has to sign off that you spent 15 minutes go to the grocery store and an hour and a half going to grandma's, and logging those hours. That's not the level of detail we're talking about behind the wheel. What we're talking about here is your job full-time AT related to individuals with disabilities and the process of evaluating, recommending, training, etc., for individuals. So, kind of two different buckets.
Okay, thank you. One person has been responsible for assessment and implementation of 504 plans and IEPs using ATP, both high and low devices in classroom settings, and has worked in skilled rehabilitation settings with behavioral health settings over 20 plus years of work, and now not at the facility. And many of them have moved on. So I think maybe this question is asking if those folks have moved on from those positions where she worked with them together. And Rosanna, please correct me if this is wrong, but so if those folks have moved on, she can still go back and reference them for those hours worked at that company at that time with that person, correct?
Right. It goes back to, what was, that's why the number of hours over a period of time, because we do recognize that people, kind of change positions, come in and out of it, et cetera. And so those work hours may be fulfilled within a half a year. They may be fulfilled over a 6-year period of time because it's fewer hours. It may be that right now, and we recognize with COVID that some people aren't comfortable being one-on-one direct in person, and that direct in person looks a little bit differently. It might be, virtual with visual and audio processes. It may be that for the last 5 years, you've done a lot of hours of AT direct in person, but over the last year and a half, you haven't. That's why the time frame is what it is to accomplish the hours. There just has to be validation that those work hours were conducted in the direct in-person realm of the provision of assistive technologies for persons that need it.
Great, thank you. Someone is asking, what is a CEC? So compared to a CEU, how would you differentiate between the two?
So a CEC is a continuing education credit. Andrea, this course that people are taking today, right now, did it go through the IACET process to be a CEU course?
No.
Okay, so your attendance here today might be considered a CEC because you took training related to assistive technologies, and you have a certificate of attendance for the hour that you were here, and that would count. In the world of AT, if a manufacturer's representative comes in and does an in-service for your organization about a particular device, wheelchair, AUGCOM device, electronic aids to daily, whatever it is, and does an in-service about a product for an hour, there's a form that you can fill out if they didn't bring it with them, that you can have them fill out that says you were there, you actively participated in the in-service on assistive technology, and that too would be a certificate of attendance for AT. That is a continuing education credit. A CEU is there's learning objectives that have to be written. There is an assessment process that verifies that the material taught to you met the learning objectives and that you learned something. And so there oftentimes is a post-test with CEU courses or course evaluations with CEU courses that validates that you've learned what was laid out in the learning objectives.
Great, thank you. I have another question regarding the textbook. So the Assistive Technologies Principles and Practice, is there a specific edition that they should use? And it would be the 3rd edition be considered adequate?
The latest edition. I think it's the 5th.
Not
Okay.
that the information in the 3rd edition is wrong. It's just updated. And so, you know, the exam does not test on technologies. It tests on process. So the 3rd edition isn't going to show you some of the latest and greatest in technology solutions. The 5th edition will. The 5th edition has also been updated in ways that we learn as we go, better ways in which to engage the process may be outlined as well.
Danielle, I think we have to, the next question has to be the last one.
That sounds good. So let's see here.
Pick a good one.
All right, I'll try to see if I can find one that applies to several folks. So through RESNA, are there opportunities to volunteer and support the organization while also continuing to provide AT-ACC support to needed individuals while acquiring hours?
No. So I think what you're asking, sorry, let me back up. I think what the question is asking is, can you volunteer through RESNA to get the work experience? And the answer is no, because the work experience must be paid.
But we will take all comers that raise their hand and volunteer to participate in the activities of RESNA. We've got professional specialty groups. We've got special interest groups. We have a variety of committees. So wherever your interest lies, if you raise your hand and say, I would like to get actively involved, we will absolutely take you.
That is true. All right, so I think we need to wrap up now. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. We'll take all of the questions from the chat and send them out to everyone who registered with answers to them. This recording will be posted on the website along with the handouts. We hope it's been helpful to you to figure out if you are eligible for the ATP certification. We look forward to seeing you as an ATP. So
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.